Hello and welcome back to what is now the third video in the series of videos that I'm recording for Field of Fitness on the subject of training the mind. Today's topic for the 30 minutes that I'm going to be speaking to you, which I hope you are watching and enjoying, is on the subject of mindfulness, being present. Mindfulness is a word and a phrase and a term and a title I'm sure everyone is very familiar with. And what I'd like to do in this 30 minutes is to talk about what is the science behind the neuroscience behind how mindfulness works, how it can work for us, how developing a mindful habit is something that we can all do. It's within all of our grasp. I don't know whether those of you are watching are people who practice mindfulness, have tried it, perhaps struggled with it, are skeptical about it. What does it mean? What does it involve? I'm hoping to answer some of those questions. And also, I want to talk about the well-being component of mindfulness. Why is it good for our well-being? Why is it good to help us to negate perhaps negative emotions and ways of feeling, ways of experiencing the world that we don't want? And I'm going to offer a perspective on that and something that you can take away. And finally, in the subject of on the subject of having something to take away, I'm going to talk about daily practice, what you could start with if you're beginning your journey with how do I meditate? What is mindfulness about? How can I introduce it into the routine, the structure of my life, to give you some suggestions on how to apply it from the perspective of daily practice. But let's start with, I want to start with a sort of philosophical perspective. We can spend a lot of our lives worrying about the future. We can spend a lot of our lives engaged in anything other than this present moment. And if you think about that philosophically, it means that we can spend an incredible amount of time not living in the moment, not living in the moment that we currently have. And therefore we spend most of our lives not living, not enjoying, not being present, not being engaged with what's going on around us. So mindfulness really is the practice of being present. And I put it into the perspective of quality because, for all of us, I'm sure the quality of what we have, what we experience, what we do in life is really important. The advertisers spend a fortune on talking about the quality of the experience we have when we go on holiday, talking about the quality of a car that we might want to aspire to purchase, talking about the quality of the clothing. The qualitative nature of our world is immense, and there's a lot of value put on that. But when it comes down to living, when it comes down to actually experiencing life, the quality of the moment that we engage with, the quality of the experience we get from any moment is fundamental. And if we're not present, how can we possibly be experiencing the quality of that moment? If we're constantly thinking about the future, if we're constantly worrying about what's going to happen at work tomorrow, or at work thinking about what's going on in my personal life, if we're with a loved one and our mind is elsewhere, we're not actually present, we're not engaged in that moment. So the practice of mindfulness really is a qualitative practice. It's when we talk about those three, with that phrase that's made up of three words, quality of life. Being present, being mindful is about engaging with, about leveraging and enjoying quality of life. So how important is that? How valuable is that? How valuable is it as something that we would want to invest in, to become better at, to practice? And what I'm going to start talking about in a moment is how our brains are wired to support that practice, just like with our physiology, when we go to the gym, when we train to be healthy, when we train to be fit, when we try to improve our fitness levels. That takes time, it takes conscious effort, it takes repetition, it takes engagement. It's no different with anything that is neurologically based or cognitively based. It takes commitment, it takes practice, it takes time. And that's exactly the same with mindfulness and being present. So developing a mindful practice is really important. And how does that work? What is it about our brains that allows us to develop mindfulness, to make mindfulness something that's going to work for us? So I'm going to start with sharing a slide just to explain something to you, which is called neuroplasticity. And why is it that neuroplasticity is something that's there to support us, not just with mindfulness, but really with everything we might care to learn? I'm going to focus in on this slide. There we go. Play from current slide. So, okay. So why our brain's neuroplasticity supports developing mindfulness. So this neuroplasticity is something that once, not that long ago, when you talk about the evolution of human beings, not that long ago, scientists thought it was something that only manifested in childhood. So neuroplasticity was something which we had in childhood, we lost in adulthood. Now, actually, research in the latter half of the 20th century showed that in many aspects, our brain can be altered, or many aspects of our brain can be altered, even through adulthood. So let's put the final nail in the coffin of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Yes, you can. And it's because of neuroplasticity. And why is that? Why is that relevant to mindfulness? Well, a mindful practice where we find ourselves in a position, I speak to people who say, I find it really difficult to focus. I find it really difficult to be in the moment because my brain's going 10 to the dozen. Well, yes, of course it's difficult if that's how you're used to being and living. However, our brain, if we give it the space, if we give it focus, if we give it time, will allow us to change. It can be altered. So neuroplasticity is the ability of the neural networks in the brain to change through growth and reorganization. And that is something that we can consciously choose to do. And that comes down to learning pretty much anything. We can create new neural pathways. We can create new habits. We can create new routines that change the way our brains work. And that supports the essence and principles of becoming more present, living more in the moment. And there's another form, so going into a bit more detail in terms of the neuroscience of it, there's something called activity-dependent neuroplasticity, which is basically the sort of forging of a structure and then behaviors to create a new experience. So basically, if we actually have a structure of doing something and we have a way of behaving, then those two things coming together, so the structure being the routine of setting time aside to be mindful or being conscious throughout the day of being mindful, together with that actual mindful behavior creates the forging, create the structure and the behavior, create the forging that allows our brains to change. And just the third point on the slide is talking about how powerful is our ability to take on new habits, to create new neural pathways. Well, in actual fact, it's been shown through studies that continuous practice with a non-dominant hand can cause us to become ambidextrous. So yeah, we can be right-handed, but if we practice with our left hand, practice, we're going to create those pathways to allow us to become left-handed, or allow us to become ambidextrous. So there's a lot of power, when we train our physiology, or we learn to run a 5K faster than we normally run it, we kind of see the evidence, we see a physical evidence, sometimes with things to do with the brain, because we're perhaps not seeing those results so quickly, or they're not a visible result, they're up here, it can be harder to get our heads around. But get our heads around it, we can indeed. So that's a very important point to make, that the neuroplasticity of our brain supports developing mindfulness. So that aside, let's talk about, I want to cover how mindfulness and the development of our brains through developing the neuroplasticity of our brains to be mindful, how mindfulness can support us. Now, mindfulness can, as I said at the very beginning, it can be a qualitative, a quality creating part of living, a way of living. It can also help us to negate suffering. It can help us to negate negative emotions. It can take us to a space where we're calm, where we're resourceful. If you think about just that process of, I mean, what any of you would know about mindfulness, there's an element about breathing, there's an element about, if you're going to meditate, about being in the moment. Well, that process of being in the moment, being calmer, being present, immediately changes our physiology, immediately changes our ability to be resourceful and to deal with negative emotions. And there's a perspective on dealing with difficult experiences in life, and it's talking about them being two darts. So any pain or hardship in life can be, this is a Buddhist perspective, that it can be viewed as two darts. The first dart is the event or stimulus that causes the pain. The second dart is the way that we respond to it. So if we have a bad experience in life, that's the first dart. The pain that comes with it and the suffering and the negative emotions is the second dart. And we have control over that. So we can't avoid the suffering that life brings, but we can influence how to respond to it. This is linked partly to my last session on talking about well-being and dealing with things like anxiety. And what mindfulness does is it loosens the physical and psychological knots. It allows our body to relax and empty our mind of thoughts. And pain, therefore, and when I talk about pain, mental pain, anguish, anxiety, unpleasant emotions, if we practice mindfulness, they become more manageable. So by doing that, going back to the dart analogy, we're separating, we're divorcing it from the suffering it can inflict. So we're allowing ourselves to take control of that second dart by being more mindful. And I'm going to give you an exercise, which obviously, this being a video, you can take a photograph of the screen. I'm going to give you an exercise to take or to utilize to help you to deal with a negative emotion. I'm making no apologies that this session is about dealing with the negative emotions, because we all have them. They're things that are unpleasant. I've talked in previous sessions about the chimp paradox. The chimp paradox is all about that. Managing the emotional part of our brain, the emotional part of our brain that gives us emotions we don't want. Mindfulness is another tool for doing that. So, as I said at the beginning, yes, it's about quality. It can add quality by being more mindful, by being more in the present moment. But part of that quality is also helping to negate the not so good stuff that can go on in our heads. So anyway, let's go back to share screen. And I'm going to just talk you through this exercise. So here's an exercise to disassociate from negative emotions through mindfulness. And this is going back to talking about neuroplasticity. This is something, if one practices and continues to practice, the more resonance is going to get. And again, sorry to keep banging this message home, but if you do this once and it doesn't work so well, don't be put off. Keep trying it. anything with meditation, anything with mindfulness, anything about being present, you know, it's not an easy, quick fix. It's a bit like you know, if you want to have a healthy lifestyle, a quick fix diet isn't going to do it for you. Yes, diets achieve quick results, and then suddenly we come off them and we go back to our old habits, put the weight on, feel shit, excuse my language, feel bad, whatever. Whereas if we have a change in lifestyle, then that may not be such a quick fix, but we're going to get the benefits from it. Mindfulness is no different to that. So investing the time and the energy and the commitment. Anyway, let's talk you through this. Slide. So, number one, identify a strong negative emotion. So think of emotion. I don't know, fear, anxiety, anger. Take a deep breath and notice the feeling, and give it a name. Anger, fear, guilt. You give it a name. You give it a name of a creature, just a dragon, a serpent, something. Just give it a name. Ask yourself, can we accept the presence of this emotion? The likely answer to that is no. Are there other emotions attached, such as shame, with guilt? Can we accept those? So really unpick, the reason it says, are there other emotions attached, is unpick what is going on with it in relation to that emotion that could be supporting it. Now zoom out of your mind and refocus on the body. Where is the feeling for that emotion located? Do you have a feeling in your stomach? Is it tightness in the shoulders? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture or even a sound? Break it down to the sensory component parts, because trust me, when I ask people to give emotion a color, when I ask people to give emotion even a sound, and certainly in a physical sense, they can often find it. Now, with that, take the sense of that, take the color of it, and change it. Change the sound of it. Change the texture of it. And this is something I'd encourage you to practice. Close your eyes and work your way through it. And what happens when you change that? What happens with that feeling? If say it's anger and it's red, what happens in your experience of that anger if you change it to green, if you change it to blue? Let's say it's fear and it has a sharp texture to it. What happens when you smooth that out? And think about what that will do, because what you'll find by doing that, by changing the sensory components of that negative emotion, by being mindful, by spending time with it, you can restructure how that feels. And this is an exercise that works. So I'd really encourage you to give it a go. Okay. So let's talk about a daily mindful practice. What I want, there are different components to having a daily mindful practice. There are components that are things that we do repeatedly. And then there is a structured practice. And I call this focused and open meditation. So open meditation is simply about being absorbed in the present moment. Now, in coaching, one of the really important skills that one develops as a coach is the ability to listen. Listen is an incredibly important skill in coaching. It's an incredibly important skill in life. One that actually probably doesn't get the time and the airtime and the focus that it should. But to be able to listen well, one needs to be present. And so actually when we're listening to other people, this is a perfect opportunity to practice being mindful, because if one can be curious about their thinking, to be engaged with what they're saying, to not be thinking about what one wants to say back to them immediately, but actually to be genuinely interested and engaged. And in that moment when someone is talking to you and you are listening, you are, by doing that, naturally practicing being mindful. And you're actually, by doing it, practicing being a better listener. So it's like it's a double whammy. If you're more present when you're listening, you're practicing being mindful. You're setting those neural pathways and developing the neuroplasticity of your brain to be more mindful. But you're actually being a better listener. You might be better at your relationships in every aspect, work, personal, whatever. So listening is a good opportunity to practice being mindful. The other thing is just really in any moment during the day when you want to be in that moment, whether it's focusing on a piece of work, whether it's spending time with somebody that you want to actually be present and spend time with, just check in on yourself. Check in whether you are actually in that moment. What's your mind doing? And if it's drifting, don't beat yourself up for it. It happens, it's natural. But bring yourself back to that present moment. Every time you drift away, bring yourself back to that present moment. I'm looking out in the garden from the window I'm sitting at, and a garden is a fantastic opportunity. Nature is a fantastic space in which to practice mindfulness. So punctuate your day, if you can, when you're out walking the dog, when you're out in your garden. Just observe nature. Look at a flower. Look at the colors, the textures, the tone. Think about the growth of that flower. Think about where that flower came from, what its evolution is, and just spend time. Listen to the birds. Look at the sky. Look at all the colors that in this amazing autumn that we're having that are visible. These are all wonderful opportunities to practice mindfulness. Okay, so let's talk about, that's what I call open meditation that's available to us at any point in the day. Being mindful is available to us at any point in the day. The second thing is to if we wanted to actually develop a formal practice. If you don't currently meditate and you want to start small. Just start with 5-10 minutes a day of pausing, closing your eyes, simply counting up to 10, back from 10, do it 2 or 3 times, focus on your breathing, and just spend 5 or 10 minutes really noticing how that changes your physiology, how it calms your mind, and commit to 2 or 3 times a day of 5 to 10 minute segments of closing your eyes, counting up to 10 and back, or focusing on your breathing, just to begin to reinforce your brain and your physiological combination of relaxing how you feel and feeling good about it. And the other component that's really important to being mindful is what I've just mentioned, and that's breathing. So practice focusing on your breathing. When you're exercising, focus taking deep breaths, focus really drawing on the capacity of your lungs. And you'll notice as well that the physiological components of that, the way that will develop help you to relax is extraordinary. And I'm sure this is stuff that you realize, but often the stuff that we realize aren't necessarily the things that we do. So, and the other thing to do is to try what we call progressive muscle relaxation, which is something that I use in meditation and mindful sessions. And that's actually to breathe and focus, start from your head or start from your feet, and just gradually relax different parts of your body. Almost blow a breath as you're breathing deeply down to those different parts. And again, this is a meditative process. It's a process that's going to improve our physiology. It's going to calm our mind. It's going to take our mind from the emotional limbic system to the prefrontal cortex, to where we are logical, where we are right brain and creative, where we are thinking about the world in perspective. So it's going to benefit us hugely, both physically and mentally. So daily practice, 3 things: being aware of open meditation moments, listening, being out in nature, when you're actually with somebody, just properly being with them and being present and bringing your mind back to that moment if your mind wanders. The second thing is to start with a meditative practice 2-3 times a day of 5 to 10 minutes to begin with, and increase it over a period of time, just like you might increase the reps of a bench press or a deadlift. Gradually increase the time that you're doing to build up your time in meditative practice. And then the third thing is breathing. Spend some time. You can combine it with your 5 or 10 minutes a day practice. Focus on breathing, blowing a breath to your body, relaxing your muscles through the PMR, and just combine those things. And if you bring those 3 things, if in the past you struggle with mindfulness, if in the past you struggled or you've not given it time and you want to just give it a try those 3 things, and it will, I'm sure, help you to develop the neuroplasticity, as I talked about at the beginning, the neuroscience behind getting your brain used to being mindful, and bringing it full circle to when I was talking about quality of life, adding to the quality of your life, the quality of being present, the quality of being in the moment. And in all honesty, what is not to like about that? I wish you luck. If you have any questions, let me just share one final slide. Bear with me a moment. I share these after most of my sessions, but in case you don't have it, if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask me or contact me directly, there's my email address and my WhatsApp and Leading Revitality's website. So please get in touch if we can be of any help, or you can obviously contact me through Field of Fitness. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that's been helpful, and hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.